Hi, and welcome back to Military Law Talks. So today's video is about SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, recent midnight ruling. And so over Easter weekend, SCOTUS released an order literally in the middle of the night, which in my, 20 years following the US Supreme Court is pretty unprecedented. I can't think of another time where on a holiday weekend, the Supreme Court in the middle of the night issues an order. But of course, it involves the immigration issues and all the cases that have been pending about the removal of illegal immigrants from, purported gang members and designated under President Trump a terrorist organization from Venezuela, and Venezuela is refusing to take them back. So they're being sent to a prison in El Salvador. Now, some individuals are actually from El Salvador. So like the one gang member that's been in the news and all over social media with the tattoos, and a senator even went to go visit him. He's actually from El Salvador. So he was sent back to his country where he is from. And so I've seen a whole bunch of stuff on social media. I've been asked personally a lot about this case. And so I decided, well, let me just read the opinions and go over them, do a video on it. So I'm actually going to do this video in 2 parts. And so if you're catching the live stream, you're going to get the full video, one long video. And then I'm going to release it in 2 different parts. And so if you're catching later the video release, you may want to watch the entire live stream or just watch both of the videos. Okay, so let's get into it. Okay, so this was this midnight order that came out in the middle of the night. So it was actually Good Friday night, but early Saturday morning. So it's dated as being released Saturday, April 19th. And so it is concerning this case. And I'm going to keep that in mind because I'm going to talk about 2 different cases that are interrelated. But this case is currently pending in Texas, and it's been appealed up to the 5th Circuit. So this is a Texas case, and there's also related to this a DC case. So we're going to talk about both of those cases together. But in a sense, it's a lot of the same issues. And so this case, again, this kind of, in my opinion, unprecedented order. Now, maybe this has happened before, but I just not personally aware of it. But I think a pretty unprecedented order. So this is talking about, hey, this is this case that's pending in the 5th Circuit, saying the government, you're invited to file a response. But specifically this highlighted portion, this is where the issue in this case arises. So this order was released in the middle of the night telling the government not to remove any member of the punitive class of detainees. So these would be the parties involved in this, really what's kind of been termed a class action, but it's not your typical class action, but it's a bunch of illegal aliens that are facing deportation joined in this lawsuit, all one big lawsuit, obviously against the government, against Donald Trump. And so they're saying the government can't remove any of these until there's further order from the court. But that's it. That's all it is. And then it says Justice Thomas and Alito have dissented from this court order, and there's going to be more to follow. So that's it. That's all that was released. All right, so let's take a look at really kind of, let's step back and take a look at how did we get to this point. Okay, so this is Justice Alito and Thomas's dissent to that order that I just reviewed, and it gives us more information of like, how did we get here? How did we get to this like midnight ruling telling the Trump administration to stop any deportations for that punitive class? So I interpreted that only applies to those members of that lawsuit. And so he explains it. So it says, shortly after midnight yesterday, the court hastily and prematurely granted unprecedented emergency relief. And I agree with that. Pretty unprecedented, right? And while the order doesn't say that it's an injunction, it sure has the practical effect of being an injunction, essentially stopping, enjoining a party from doing something. It orders the government, the executive branch. So we have right a tension between the judicial branch. Does the judicial branch really have the power to tell the executive branch not to engage in, well, I'm sure the executive branch is going to argue, their constitutional duty to repel an invasion, to remove, these domestic terrorists from the US. And so it says that this whole case was proceeding under the All Writs Act. And that's important. We're going to come back to that the government can't remove these detainees. And so, how did we get to the Supreme Court? Well, let's see. Remember, that case is pending in the Fifth Circuit. And Alito is saying, hey, we don't even, the Supreme Court doesn't have jurisdiction. One, the All Writs Act doesn't provide independent jurisdiction, which meaning that the court just doesn't have jurisdiction under that congressional law, that act. And so the Supreme Court would only have jurisdiction if the lower appellate court has jurisdiction. And that's actually currently at issue. The lower court doesn't even think that they have jurisdiction. And so what happened at the lower courts is that the district court didn't actually deny a request for a TRO. It was just inferred that it constructively denied it. So let's take a step back and think about this. So the petitioners, the plaintiffs in this case, this group of illegal immigrants who the government is saying that they're actually terrorists, they're part of this terrorist gang organization and that they need to be removed, they filed a motion for a temporary restraining order at the district court level. Now, the district court level didn't actually rule on it yet. The district court level judge didn't issue an opinion. It just said, hey, the court said that they were going to issue an opinion by some sort of deadline. Well, it looks like, based on what Alito is saying, is that deadline wasn't even a court-imposed deadline. It was a council-imposed deadline. So it looks like that the plaintiffs in this case, the attorneys for these illegal gang members, these terrorist members, which I think that they're represented by the ACLU, but I'm not for sure, that they actually said, hey, district court, you need to rule on this by X, Y, and Z time and date. And if not, we're going to deem that as a deemed denial, essentially a constructive denial. And so apparently the district court didn't rule at all, didn't decide yes or no on this TRO. Then counsel for the plaintiffs, again, these illegal immigrants or alien terrorists, whatever you want to call them, then they went up to the Fifth Circuit and they said, well, we're going to appeal to the Fifth Circuit. And then the Fifth Circuit said, well, we actually think that we lack jurisdiction. We can't hear this case right now because the district court hasn't even resolved it. You need to go back to the district court and either get that judge to either approve and grant your temporary restraining order or deny it. We don't have jurisdiction yet. You're here too early. The district court hasn't had the opportunity to actually rule on it. So the Fifth Circuit said, hey, we don't have jurisdiction. And Alito is saying, hey, if the Fifth Circuit doesn't have jurisdiction, then U.S. Supreme Court doesn't have jurisdiction either. You just can't, the U.S. Supreme Court can't just jump the line and say, hey, district court, we're just going to take this case and pull it up to our level and essentially grant the TRO. Because in effect, that's what happened. And so Justice Alito is saying, what are we doing here? We shouldn't be here. The district court didn't have the opportunity to even rule on this. And when he provides more information, you'll see. So it says that they requested a ruling on Good Friday within 45 minutes. So they said, "Hey, district court, we want an opinion within 45 minutes." And then after 133 minutes, when the district court didn't issue a ruling, which, when we do things like hastily, and I'm going to tell you as a legal professional, like, I always like to think on things, particularly really big decisions. I try to, if I can, give it a night's rest, because when we make like hasty decisions, they're usually not great decisions. And so they certified this appeal on the same day. So they asked the district court. District court didn't issue an opinion within the 45 minutes on Good Friday that they wanted. And so then they went up to the Fifth Circuit, and the Fifth Circuit was like, "Hey, we're actually considering this, and we're going to give it a decision. It's going to be forthcoming." And the Supreme Court actually issued their ruling before the Fifth Circuit issued their ruling. But Alito, because he's got some more time and issued his opinion after that, came back and said, "Hey, only like hours later, the Fifth Circuit came after the U.S. Supreme Court and said, we don't have jurisdiction because the district court like hasn't actually ruled on this. So parties, y'all are here too early." And so, but the U.S. Supreme Court, in, like I said, kind of bizarre fashion that I've never heard before, issued this midnight decision. And more glaringly important to understand is the government never had the opportunity to respond. So the only information that the U.S. Supreme Court had, that the Fifth Circuit had, that maybe even the district court had, was the pleadings of the plaintiff. They never had the other side. They never had the government's argument. And so that's this hasty, rushed opinion. And Alito points out later in this opinion that, well, in the plaintiff's information, they said that these plaintiffs are in immediate danger of removal. And that's why we're rushing. You got to stop the government from taking them out of the country. But Alito points out in a different case, which this is the district court in DC, another case, which I'm going to talk about. It said the government argued in that other case. So remember, we're talking about the Texas case, but this is the DC case, but similar facts, maybe different groups of plaintiffs, but similar information, saying that, hey, the government doesn't have any deportations planned. It's Easter weekend. It's Good Friday. We don't have any, the government didn't have any deportations planned for the weekend. And so Alito's saying like, hey, we're doing all this hasty stuff for a non-emergency. There's not actually an emergency. And the district court didn't even certify these plaintiffs as a class. And potentially the plaintiffs need to have habeas. They need to bring their lawsuits based on habeas grounds, and I'll explain what that is. But that they actually likely don't even have the ability to bring this kind of quote unquote class action lawsuit. And so they said that Alito's arguing that maybe based on previous precedent, these individual plaintiffs actually have to bring individual habeas corpus petitions, which that means the Latin, it's literal Latin says, where is the body, is essentially when someone who thinks that they're wrongfully being detained, wrongfully imprisoned, they can petition the court to say, hey, you need to look into this. I'm being wrongfully detained. And so I'm just going to sum it up. Alito's and his words, Alito and Thomas, their dissent. In sum, literally in the middle of the night, the Supreme Court issued unprecedented and legally questionable relief without giving the lower courts a chance to rule, without hearing from the opposing party within 8 hours of receiving the application, with dubious factual support for its order, and without providing any explanation for its order. Remember, it was 2 scant paragraphs. And so he says, Alito, in his dissent, continues, both the executive and the judiciary have an obligation to follow the law. The executive must proceed under the terms of our order in Trump versus JGG, and this court should follow established procedures. And so I'll go over those other opinions in part 2 of this video. And so this is the end of part 1. But if you're catching the live stream, I'm going to go ahead and launch into part 2. Thank you for joining me. And if you got any value out of the content, please like, share, and subscribe. I'm a new channel, so please help spread the word. I really appreciate your sharing this message out there. If you have any comments or questions or requests for additional content, please put them in the comments below. Thank you.